Come here for a second. Video games are not childish. In reality, they haven't been for quite a while now. I know in the early 80s and 90s they kind of were, because that was just kind of what kids did. You know, you played Mario, you played Pong, you played Sonic the Hedgehog, and you just had fun with it. But before I get into the video, I just want to leave a quick reminder that I do stream over on Twitch, twitch.tv/Logan. Feel free to stop on by and tell me what you think about video games and if you think they're childish or not. And this, in all honesty, probably isn't even a popular thought in today's world in the year of our Lord 2021. The thing is that within Christian circles, you tend to hear pastors and well-meaning teachers say that video games are childish. 1 Corinthians 13:11 is a verse that I've seen come up a lot around this discussion, and the thing is, that verse has nothing to do with video games. You'll hear people say, oh, well, this says to give up childish things, so give up video games. But people will say that that verse applies to video games when really it doesn't. In the context of that verse, it's talking about not being selfish and not focusing on what only you want. And so the thing of it is that it's not biblical. It's not in the verse. But you'll hear people say that though, and it's like, well, maybe I think you throwing a fit over your favorite sports team not winning is childish. Does that mean you should give up football? No. But like I said, video games have not been childish for a long time now. I mean, let's just go over a couple different things and how they are completely different than video games of the 80s and the 90s era. For example, storytelling. Look no further than 2018's God of War. Now this game follows Kratos and his son Atreus as they carry Atreus' mother's ashes to the top of this mountain to release her ashes, which was one of her last remaining wishes. And in the game, you see Kratos trying to figure out what it means to be a more gentle and nurturing parent when he's been the kind of rough and stoic manly man all of Atreus' life. And then you see Atreus trying to figure out what it means to be a man and a leader and to have courage despite his mother potentially babying him most of his life. And through the game, you see this dynamic, this tug of war, so to speak, between the two, and them trying to really come to grasp with their new roles in their family. Now, what you might be surprised to learn about this game is it actually sparked a conversation about toxic masculinity within games media. And what's interesting around this conversation is that when you really look at the game and you look at how masculinity is presented, there's some similarities to what the Bible teaches about masculinity. But that's just one example of a game that takes a theme and explores it in a video game. But then you have a game like The Last of Us that explores a whole different side of fatherhood that is really dark, but also interesting to see how it all plays out. We actually did episodes on both of those games for the podcast, so if you're interested in that, check out the link down in the description bar below. But in a similar vein of video games taking themes and exploring them in a video game context, you also have the theme of mental health, which a game like Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice or Celeste explores and, in my opinion, depicts pretty responsibly. As a matter of fact, the developer of Hellblade, Ninja Theory, actually brought in a group of consultants of both mental health professionals and people who struggle with psychosis and different mental health issues onto the team to lend their voices to the game so that they could depict Senua's psychosis more faithfully and authentically. And as a result, you get a really dark fantasy adventure game of Senua trying to rescue her lover from hell's grasp, all the while battling her own hell, which is in her mind. It's a hard game to recommend, I'm not gonna lie. But at the same time, it's a fascinating exploration into what it's like for someone who deals with psychosis and hears voices that are taunting her all throughout the game. Which, as a side note, if you do feel brave and you want to play the game, definitely play it with headphones, because the way that they do audio in that game is unlike anything else you have ever experienced in a video game or entertainment in general. And then quite possibly the easiest thing to point to is the sense of community that video games bring to the players. I mean, there's a reason that games like Rainbow Six Siege, Final Fantasy XIV, Rocket League, Overwatch, just to name a few, are so popular, and why some of them are even mainstays within the professional esports arena. Now, in Reality is Broken, Jane McGonigal actually spends some time in Chapter 3 discussing how there's the science of how games give us an opportunity to succeed, which then gives us more optimistic tendencies. And because we are more optimistic, we're tending to? Words are hard. We tend to want to share these experiences with other people. For example, she says here on page 76, when we feel a strong sense of agency and motivation, we draw other people closer into our lives. And that's why so much of the fun failure we experience in games is increasingly taking place in a social context. More and more, we are inviting our friends and family to play with us, whether it's in person or online. Now, the games that I mentioned before, those all have pretty big communities and pretty active communities of players surrounding the games, people that have formed longtime friendships and almost brotherhoods within the context of those games because they're working together to accomplish a similar goal. And what's interesting about this is that when we really take the time to pull back and look at kind of the community side of video games, there's a lot that churches and pastors and Christians in general can learn just by observing how these communities interact and engage with one another. And it begs the question, how much more effective could the church be if we took some notes from what these communities are doing? Sure, video games, some of them at least, are childish, but not all of them. And video games are changing the way that people are engaging with not only entertainment, but with one another. And it's pretty fascinating when you take the time to dig deep and see what video games are accomplishing. But those are just some of the ways that video games have changed over the past couple of decades and have shown that they're not exactly childish anymore, and they're doing some pretty incredible things, and they're discussing some incredible topics, and they're allowing people to engage and experience these themes in ways that they probably wouldn't anywhere else. But what about you? Have you encountered that criticism that video games are childish, and what do you think? Let me know down in the comments below, and let's continue the conversation over there. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you didn't like this video, hit the dislike button and let me know what I could be doing better. And as always, if you want more content like this, hit the subscribe button down below. And until next time, be a deer, keep it locked here. I'll see you in the next video.